You thought I was poor. My son destroyed my life until he learned my hidden fortune. Subscribe our channel and become part of our growing community family so you never miss a new story. My name is David, and for many years, people looked at my simple clothes and quiet lifestyle and believed they knew everything about me. Even my own son thought I had nothing left to offer. But he never knew the truth I had kept hidden for decades, and the day he discovered it changed our family forever. For most of my life, I never cared about showing people what I owned. I believed that a person's value was not measured by expensive clothes, luxury cars, or the size of their home. After decades of hard work, I had learned that peace of mind was worth more than anything money could buy. I lived in a small house, drove an old car, and kept my daily routines simple. To strangers, I looked like an ordinary retired man who had nothing special left to offer. What they didn't know was that my simple lifestyle was a choice, not a reflection of my true situation. My son Daniel had always been the most important person in my life. After his mother passed away, I dedicated years to supporting him and helping him build his future. I worked long hours, sacrificed many personal dreams, and made sure he had every opportunity I never had. But as Daniel grew older and became more successful, I noticed a change in the way he viewed me. He began comparing my life to the lives of other parents who displayed their wealth openly. He would make comments about my old clothes, or ask why I still lived so simply when I had worked for so many years. I never became angry because I believed he would understand one day. I'd always kept my financial affairs private because I wanted my son to love and respect me for who I was, not for what I possessed. Over time, however, his assumptions became more painful. He started believing that I was a burden instead of the person who had supported him through every difficult moment. The hardest moment came when he made a decision that changed our relationship. He told me that he wanted to move forward with his own plans and that he no longer wanted my advice or involvement in his life. His words hurt deeply, but I stayed silent. I knew there were things he didn't understand yet, and I believed that the truth would eventually reveal itself. What I didn't know was that a series of events was about to happen that would force my son to see me in a completely different way. After Daniel began creating distance between us, I tried my best to accept his decision with patience. As a father, watching your child become distant is one of the hardest experiences. But I never wanted to force my way into his life. I believed that love should be given freely, not demanded. I continued living the same quiet life, spending my days reading, taking walks, and remembering the years when my son and I were much closer. However, I soon discovered that Daniel's opinions about me had become even more negative. During a family gathering, I overheard him telling someone that I had wasted my life and that I had nothing meaningful to leave behind. Hearing those words from my own son was painful, but I chose not to react. I knew that arguing would only create a bigger distance between us. What Daniel didn't know was that many years earlier, I had made decisions that would secure our family's future. I had invested carefully, built strong relationships, and created financial stability without ever changing my simple lifestyle. I never told him about those things because I wanted him to create his own path and learn the value of hard work. Unfortunately, my silence made him believe the opposite. He thought I had failed, when in reality I had spent years quietly preparing for the future. A few months later, Daniel faced difficulties in his own life. Some of the choices he had made were not working out as planned, and he began searching for support. Instead of asking me directly, he continued believing that I had nothing to offer. One evening, I received a message from him asking if we could meet. I was surprised because we had not had a serious conversation in a long time. When we sat together, I could see that he was carrying stress and disappointment. He started talking about his struggles, and for the first time in years, he stopped pretending that everything was perfect. I listened carefully, not because I wanted to prove I was right, but because he was still my son. During that conversation, I realized that this was not the moment to reveal everything I had hidden. Sometimes people need to understand the value of something before they can truly appreciate it, and Daniel's journey toward that understanding had only just begun. During the weeks that followed, I noticed a small change in Daniel's attitude. He was no longer as confident about the assumptions he had made about my life. The challenges he was facing had forced him to look at things differently, and for the first time in a long while, he started asking about my experiences instead of judging my choices. One evening we sat together over a simple dinner, and he asked me why I had always chosen to live so modestly when I could have lived a completely different lifestyle. I smiled and told him that happiness was never about impressing other people. I explained that I had spent my younger years building something valuable, but I had also learned that money should be a tool, not the center of a person's identity. Daniel listened quietly, but I could tell he still struggled to understand the full picture. He had spent so many years believing that appearances revealed the truth that it was difficult for him to accept that he might have been wrong. Around the same time, an unexpected opportunity brought my hidden past closer to being revealed. A longtime business partner contacted me and requested a meeting. He wanted to discuss the future of an investment project that we had started many years earlier. I agreed to meet him, but I asked him to keep the conversation private because I still wasn't ready to change the way people viewed me. During the meeting, he reminded me of how much effort we had put into building that project and how carefully we had planned for the future. He also asked why I continued hiding my success from my own family. I didn't have an easy answer. I told him that I wanted my son to learn responsibility, independence, and the importance of character before knowing about my financial situation. However, I also admitted that perhaps my silence had created misunderstandings that caused unnecessary pain. That night, I looked through old documents and memories from the years I had worked quietly behind the scenes. I realized that keeping my achievements hidden had protected my values, but it had also created a distance between me and my son. I knew that the truth would eventually have to come out, but I wanted it to happen at the right moment, not as a way to punish Daniel, but as a chance for both of us to finally understand each other. The moment I had been waiting for arrived sooner than I expected. A few days after my conversation with my old business partner, I received a call that would change the way my family saw me forever. The company we had built many years earlier was preparing for a major announcement, and I was invited to attend a private meeting with the leadership team. I had spent years staying away from the spotlight, allowing others to manage the public side of the business while I focused on making careful decisions behind the scenes. I never needed recognition because I knew the value of what I had created. However, this time I felt that avoiding the truth was no longer helping anyone, especially Daniel. Before the meeting, I decided to have a conversation with him. I invited him to join me, not because I wanted to surprise him or make him feel guilty, but because I wanted him to understand the choices I had made throughout my life. When we arrived, Daniel looked confused. He had always believed I was just a retired man, living a simple life, and he had no idea why I was being welcomed so warmly by people who seemed to know me so well. As we entered the conference room, several executives greeted me with respect and appreciation. They spoke about the years of dedication, careful planning, and leadership that had helped the organization grow. Daniel listened quietly as he slowly began realizing that the father he had underestimated was someone very different from the person he imagined. I watched his expression change, but I didn't feel happiness from proving him wrong. Instead, I felt sadness that it had taken such a moment for him to see the truth. After the meeting, Daniel and I sat together privately. He asked me why I had never told him about this part of my life. I explained that I wanted him to build his own confidence and never depend on my success. I wanted him to value hard work, kindness, and responsibility more than wealth. He remained silent for a long time, and I could see that he was processing everything he had believed about me. That day was not about revealing a fortune. It was about revealing the years of love, sacrifice, and lessons that had always been hidden behind my simple appearance. After that meeting, Daniel seemed like a completely different person. The confidence he once carried when judging my life had been replaced by quiet reflection. For the first time, he began asking questions about my past, not with curiosity about money, but with a desire to understand the choices I had made. We spent an entire afternoon together, and I shared stories I had rarely spoken about. I told him about the years when I worked long hours, the risks I had taken, and the moments when I had to make difficult decisions without knowing whether they would succeed. I explained that every achievement had come with patience, discipline, and many sacrifices that no one ever saw. Daniel listened carefully, and I could tell that he was beginning to understand that the simple life I chose was not because I had failed, but because I had different priorities. He admitted that he had spent years comparing me to other people who displayed their success openly. He said he had mistaken a quiet lifestyle for weakness and had judged me without knowing the full story. Hearing those words was painful, but I appreciated his honesty. I told him that I was not angry because anger would only keep us trapped in the past. What mattered was what we chose to do from that moment forward. Over the next few weeks, Daniel started making an effort to rebuild our relationship. He visited more often, asked for my advice, and showed genuine interest in the lessons I had learned throughout my life. I noticed that our conversations became deeper and more meaningful than they had been in years. One evening, while we were sitting together outside my home, Daniel looked at me and said that he finally understood something important. He realized that a person's greatest wealth is not only what they own, but also the wisdom, relationships, and values they leave behind. I smiled because that was the lesson I had always hoped he would learn. My hidden fortune was never just about financial success. The greatest treasure I had was the love of my family and the hope that one day we would understand each other again. As the months passed, the relationship between Daniel and me continued to change in ways I never expected. The son, who once believed I had nothing to offer, began seeking my advice, not because of my financial situation, but because he finally respected the experiences that had shaped my life. I noticed that he had become more thoughtful in the way he treated people, and that change meant more to me than any apology he could have given. One afternoon, we sat together in my old workshop, a place where I had spent countless hours building ideas, planning projects, and working toward a better future. Daniel looked around and asked why I had never replaced the simple tools and furniture, despite having the ability to buy anything I wanted. I smiled and explained that those things represented memories. Every scratch and every mark reminded me of the effort, patience, and determination that helped me reach where I was. I told him that success was not about removing every reminder of the past. Sometimes the past is what keeps a person humble. Daniel listened carefully and admitted that he had spent years chasing the image of success without understanding the work and sacrifices behind it. He said that he had been so focused on appearances that he had forgotten to appreciate the people who truly cared about him. Hearing him say those words gave me a sense of peace. I didn't need him to admire my achievements. I only wanted him to understand the values that had guided my life. Soon after, Daniel asked if he could become more involved in some of the family projects I had built over the years. I told him that opportunities should never be given simply because of family connections. They should be earned through dedication, responsibility, and a willingness to learn. He agreed and began proving himself through his actions. Watching him grow reminded me that people can change when they are willing to accept the truth and learn from their mistakes. The fortune I had hidden for so long was finally known, but the real reward was seeing my son discover a greater fortune within himself. Humility, understanding, and respect. As time went on, I realized that the biggest change in Daniel was not the way he treated my success, but the way he treated people around him. Before, he had been focused on what the world could see, achievements, appearances, and the opinions of others. Now, he started paying attention to the things that truly mattered. He became more patient, more understanding, and more willing to listen before making judgments. One evening, we attended a family gathering where some relatives who had also misunderstood my situation were present. They had always assumed that my quiet lifestyle meant I had struggled after retirement. When they saw the respect people showed me and learned more about the work I had done over the years, their opinions changed. But I reminded Daniel that the purpose of revealing the truth was never to make others feel embarrassed. I told him that real success does not come from proving people wrong. It comes from living a life you can be proud of. Daniel remembered those words, and they became something he often repeated whenever he faced difficult decisions. A few months later, he came to me with an idea for a new project. Instead of expecting my support because I was his father, he presented a detailed plan, explained the risks, and asked for my honest opinion. I was proud because I saw that he was no longer depending on my achievements. He was building confidence through his own efforts. I agreed to guide him, but I made it clear that he would have to earn every opportunity through hard work. Together, we spent many hours discussing ideas, solving problems, and learning from each other. Those moments brought back the connection we had lost over the years. Looking back, I understood that the greatest misunderstanding between us was never about money. It was about perception. Daniel thought I had nothing because I chose a simple life, while I knew that true wealth was found in experiences, relationships, and the ability to help others. The fortune he discovered changed his view of me, but the lessons we learned together changed both of us forever. As the years passed, I often looked back at the difficult period when my son believed I had nothing and wondered how different things might have been if we had simply talked openly from the beginning. I realized that many family problems are not created by a lack of love, but by a lack of understanding. Daniel and I had both allowed assumptions to create distance between us. He assumed my simple lifestyle meant I had failed, while I assumed my silence would teach him important lessons. We were both trying to do what we thought was right, but we failed to communicate what was truly in our hearts. One day, Daniel asked me why I had never shown him the documents and achievements I'd kept private for so many years. I told him that I wanted him to discover his own abilities instead of depending on what I had built. I explained that a person's future should be created through their own determination, not inherited without effort. He nodded and told me that he finally understood why I had made those choices. He said that knowing about my success had changed his perspective, but knowing about my sacrifices had changed his heart. Those words meant more to me than anything else. Later that year, Daniel organized a small family celebration to honor the people who had supported him throughout his life. During his speech, he thanked me for the lessons I had taught him, especially the ones he had learned when he misunderstood me. He said that the greatest mistake he had made was judging someone based on what he could see instead of trying to understand the story behind it. I listened quietly, feeling a mixture of pride and emotion. I never wanted my son to admire me because of my achievements. I wanted him to respect the values that helped me create those achievements. That day reminded me that the greatest fortune a parent can receive is not wealth or recognition. It is seeing their child grow into a person who understands kindness, humility, and the importance of family. The hidden fortune that changed Daniel's view of me was never the most valuable thing I possessed. The most valuable thing was the relationship we rebuilt after years of misunderstanding. I entered the later years of my life. I found myself thinking less about the fortune I had built and more about the lessons that came from the journey with my son. The money and success I had kept private for so long were never meant to become the center of my story. They were simply the result of years of patience, discipline, and careful decisions. The real story was about a father and son who lost their way and then found a path back to each other. Daniel had once looked at my old clothes, my small home, and my quiet habits and believed they represented failure. But eventually, he learned that appearances rarely tell the complete story. A person can live simply and still carry a lifetime of achievements, experiences, and wisdom. One evening, while we were having dinner together, Daniel asked me if I regretted keeping my success hidden from him for so many years. I thought about his question carefully before answering. I told him that I did not regret wanting him to build his own identity, but I did regret allowing the distance between us to grow without having deeper conversations. I explained that protecting someone and keeping them unaware are not always the same thing. Sometimes people need guidance along with independence. Daniel agreed and said that he wished he had asked more questions instead of making conclusions. That conversation became another important step in our relationship. We both understood that the past could not be changed, but the future could be shaped by the choices we made from that moment forward. As I watched my son become a more thoughtful and responsible person, I felt a quiet sense of happiness. The person who once underestimated me had become someone who valued my advice and respected the journey behind my success. Looking back, I realized that the hardest moments of our lives often reveal the lessons we need the most. The day Daniel discovered my hidden fortune was not the day he truly understood me. The day he listened to my story, understood my sacrifices, and valued our relationship, that was the day he finally discovered the greatest treasure of all. In the final years of my journey, I often sat quietly and thought about all the moments that had shaped my relationship with Daniel. There was a time when I believed that losing his respect was one of the greatest pains I could experience. But now I understood that our difficult chapter had taught us both something valuable. Sometimes people need to experience challenges before they can truly appreciate the things they once overlooked. Daniel had learned that a person's worth is not measured by their possessions, and I had learned that even the strongest relationships need open communication and honesty. Our family became closer than it had been in many years. Daniel continued building his own success, but he carried the lessons from our past with him. He no longer judged people based on appearances, and he often reminded others that everyone has a story that cannot be seen from the outside. One afternoon, we visited the old house where I'd spent many years working and planning for the future. Daniel walked through the rooms and noticed all the simple things I had kept despite having the ability to replace them with expensive items. He smiled and told me that he finally understood why those things mattered to me. They were not signs of what I lacked. They were reminders of where I came from and what I had overcome. I felt proud hearing him say that because it showed that he had learned the lesson. I wanted him to understand all along. The fortune I had built was important, but it was never the reason I worked so hard. I worked hard because I wanted to create security, protect the people I loved, and leave behind something meaningful. When I looked at Daniel, I no longer saw the son who once misunderstood me. I saw a man who had grown through his mistakes and become someone with compassion and wisdom. Our story taught me that misunderstandings can create painful distances, but love and patience can build bridges stronger than before. The hidden fortune changed how my son saw my life, but the journey we shared changed how we both understood the true meaning of wealth. Today, when I look back at everything that happened, I no longer remember the pain of being misunderstood. Instead, I remember the lesson that came from it. For many years, I believed that keeping my success private was the best way to protect the values I wanted my son to learn. I wanted Daniel to understand hard work, responsibility, and kindness before he knew anything about my achievements. But I also learned that love requires communication. Sometimes the people closest to us do not need perfection from us. They simply need honesty and the chance to understand our choices. My son once believed I was poor because of the simple life I chose to live. He thought my old clothes, quiet home, and humble habits represented failure. But when he discovered the truth, he realized that wealth is not always visible. Some of the richest people are those who carry wisdom, experience, and love that cannot be measured by numbers. The greatest change was not that Daniel learned about my fortune. The greatest change was that he learned about my journey. He discovered the sacrifices behind my decisions, the challenges I faced, and the reasons I chose a different path. In return, I discovered that my son was capable of growth, understanding, and compassion. Our relationship became stronger because we both chose forgiveness instead of holding on to the mistakes of the past. If there is one lesson I want my story to leave behind, it is this: never judge a person's life only by what you can see. A quiet person may carry incredible experiences, and a simple life may hide a story of great determination. The most valuable treasures are often the ones that cannot be placed in a bank account. They are the memories we create, the relationships we protect, and the love we share with the people who matter most. My hidden fortune changed my son's perspective, but the real fortune was finding our way back to each other. And that is the legacy I will always treasure more than anything else. I'm very glad to see you here. Please responses of over weak point and commenters over liveless points. Subscribe over channel to get more videos. Maybe live happy, maybe live long.